Evan adjusted the cuffs of his navy suit for the third time that evening. His parents sat beside him, perfectly composed, as though this night was simply another business meeting. He hadn't met his fiancée, not once, not even a phone call. The arrangement had been handled neatly between parents like a transaction. And as always, Evan had agreed. He always agreed. The chauffeur pulled up to the long driveway of the Rosendale estate. As the car door opened, Evan exhaled slowly, practicing the polite smile he would wear all night. Inside, crystal chandeliers sparkled above the dining hall. A long table stretched across the room. At its head sat Mr. and Mrs. Rosendale. "Evan," his father said softly behind him, "remember, first impressions matter. Don't disappoint us." Evan only nodded, stepping forward. "Ah, the Whitmores," Mrs. Rosendale said, rising gracefully from her chair. "And this must be Evan. We've heard so much about you." Evan bowed his head slightly. "It's an honor to finally meet you." Beside Mrs. Rosendale, his fiancée, Claire Rosendale, stood. She was beautiful with a quiet smile. But when Evan looked into her eyes, he saw no spark. No nerves. Just composure. She was as resigned to this arrangement as he was. "It's nice to meet you," Claire said politely, her voice soft. "And you?" Evan replied with the same practiced grace. But before he could retreat into the comfort of small talk, another voice cut through the air. "Late Whitmores." The tone was cool, disdain dripping from every syllable. Evan turned his head to see a man leaned against the doorframe, the top buttons of his shirt undone as though dinner was an inconvenience. This must be him, Adrian Rosendale, Claire's older brother. Unlike the rest of his family, Adrian didn't smile. He looked at Evan as though sizing up a rival he had already decided he didn't like. "Adrian," Mrs. Rosendale said with an almost warning tone, "please, behave." Adrian pushed off the doorframe and walked toward the table. His gaze swept Evan head to toe, then back up again. "Claire's fiancé, huh?" he said at last, sliding into his seat across from Evan. "We'll see how long that lasts." The table went stiff with tension. Claire glanced nervously between them, while Mr. Rosendale cleared his throat. "It's a pleasure to meet you too," Evan said evenly. And as dinner began, Adrian's eyes never quite left him. "So, Evan," Mr. Rosendale began, folding his napkin neatly, "I understand you've taken over part of your father's investments recently? Quite impressive for your age." "Impressive," Adrian cut in, his tone dry. "Or just well-connected?" The words slid across the table like a blade. Claire stiffened beside her brother, shooting him a warning glance, but Adrian only sipped his wine. Evan didn't let his smile falter. "Connections help, but you still have to prove yourself eventually." That earned him the faintest lift of Adrian's brow, as if Evan had passed some hidden test. Mrs. Rosendale quickly shifted the subject. "Claire, darling, why don't you tell Evan about your work with the gallery?" Claire folded her hands in her lap, her voice soft. "I curate exhibitions at the downtown museum." She glanced briefly at Evan. Evan leaned toward her slightly. "That sounds incredible. Do you have a favorite piece right now?" "The Van Allen installation," she replied after a pause, "though I doubt it's your taste." "I'd love to see it," Evan said simply. Mrs. Rosendale clasped her hands together with a satisfied smile. "Then it's settled. You two should spend some time together outside these formal dinners." "A date?" Evan hesitated only a second before nodding. "Of course. I'd be glad to." Claire smiled politely. "As would I." The parents exchanged approving looks. But from across the table, Adrian let out a sarcastic laugh. "A date? How romantic. Let's hope you won't bore my sister to death, Whitmore." "Adrian," Mr. Rosendale snapped, his tone sharp. Adrian only shrugged, leaning back in his chair, eyes still locked on Evan. A few days later, Evan and Claire went on a date. The restaurant was one of those softly lit places. Evan had chosen it not for himself, but because he knew Claire's parents would approve when they inevitably asked how it went. Claire sat across from him, elegant as always. Everything about her radiated the perfection her family demanded. The silence between them stretched, and Evan finally broke it with a polite smile. "So, how was your week at the gallery?" "Busy." But Susan made it bearable. Evan tilted his head. "Susan, my best friend," she said quickly, smiling the first genuine smile he'd seen on her face since he met her. "She's brilliant. We've been close since university. She came to help with the Van Allen installation and, well, we stayed up until dawn putting everything together. She always knows how to make me laugh when I'm stressed." Evan nodded, keeping his expression neutral. "That's good," Evan said evenly. "Everyone needs someone they can lean on." Claire nodded eagerly. "Exactly. Susan understands me in a way most people don't. She's special." Evan knows that she might not say it aloud, but her heart was already somewhere else. The food arrived, giving them both something to focus on. Claire picked delicately at her plate, still speaking. "Susan keeps telling me to relax more, to stop letting my parents control everything. She thinks I'm too—" She broke off, her eyes flicking up to Evan with something like hesitation. "Too obedient." Evan let out a small laugh under his breath. "I've heard that one before." Claire blinked, surprised, before a smile tugged at her lips. The rest of the dinner passed in gentle conversation, but Susan slipped back into it. Evan listened, polite as ever, but inside he already knew. Claire's heart belonged to someone else entirely. Later that night, Evan returned home. The house was quiet when Evan returned. His parents were waiting in the sitting room. His father looked up first. "Well, how was the evening?" Evan shrugged out of his coat, hanging it neatly on the rack before answering. "It was fine. Claire is polite." He hesitated, then added carefully, "But I don't think she wants this marriage." His mother arched a brow. "Nonsense. She's a Rosendale. Of course she understands her duty." Evan swallowed, keeping his tone even. "It's not duty I'm questioning. It's her heart. I just don't think she's interested in me that way." His father waved a dismissive hand. "She'll adjust. These things aren't about love, Evan. Families like ours have responsibilities greater than infatuation." "But—" "No buts." His mother's voice cut clean through the air. "You agreed to this arrangement. We expect you to see it through." Evan clenched his jaw. He wanted to say that he didn't want this either, but instead he kept quiet, as he always did. "There will be another gathering this weekend," his father continued smoothly. "The Rosendales invited us to their estate. More time for you and Claire to bond. And," his eyes gleamed, "for you to continue making a good impression on Adrian." At the mention of the name, Evan's pulse jumped before he could stop it. He gave only a nod. "Understood." Few days later, the Rosendale estate was even more beautiful in daylight. Claire greeted Evan politely at the entrance. Inside, Adrian was there, sprawled across an armchair. When Evan entered, Adrian's gaze snapped to him immediately. "Well, well, the dutiful fiancé," Adrian drawled, rising to his feet. He circled the table slowly. "How was your romantic evening with my sister?" Before Evan could respond, Mrs. Rosendale entered into the room. "Evan, Adrian, why don't you two get to know each other better? You'll be seeing much of one another in the future." Adrian's smirk deepened, his gaze lingering on Evan. "Oh, don't worry. We will." As Evan followed the family toward the garden, he couldn't shake the weight of Adrian's eyes on his back. The lunch passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles. Evan played his part, answering questions about business, even pretending to laugh at Mr. Rosendale's stiff jokes. Claire sat beside him, quiet, her hands folded like porcelain on her lap. But all through the meal, Evan could feel it, the steady weight of Adrian's gaze. When the dishes were finally cleared and the families dispersed across the garden, Evan slipped toward the far end of the path, hoping to get some air. "You wear the mask well, Whitmore." Evan turned to see Adrian leaned lazily against the stone railing. Evan exhaled slowly. "I didn't realize I was being watched so closely." "You were," Adrian said simply. He pushed off the railing and stepped closer, his voice dropping low. Tell me something. Why do you and my sister let them control you like this? Evan froze. He hadn't expected the question. Adrian tilted his head, studying him. I watched you both today. Polite smiles, perfect manners. Do you ever think for yourself, Whitmore? Or is obedience just easier? Evan's jaw tightened. It's called respect. Some of us care about family expectations. Respect. Adrian let out a short, humorless laugh. No. That's fear. Evan said nothing, because some part of him knew Adrian was right, but he kept his expression calm, unwilling to give Adrian the satisfaction of cracking his mask. Finally, Adrian brushed past Evan, his shoulder brushing his lightly before he disappeared back toward the house. The afternoon at the sitting room. Evan sat beside his parents on one side of the table, Claire across from him. Adrian had taken up his usual post by the window. Mr. Rosendale cleared his throat. Now that the families have become better acquainted, I think it's time we begin discussing the wedding preparations. The words hit Evan like ice water. His back went rigid, his father's approving nod only sharpening the weight pressing down on his chest. We thought spring would be fitting for the wedding, Mrs. Rosendale continued smoothly. That should give us enough time for planning. Spring. It wasn't far away, it was soon. Evan's fingers curled tightly around the armrest of his chair. Adrian's voice came back to him like a taunt. Why do you and my sister let them control you like this? Across the table, Claire's composure cracked for the briefest second. She didn't want this either. Spring sounds lovely, Evan heard himself say. Lovely? Claire repeated, sounding empty. His parents smiled with satisfaction. That night, Evan decided to go to the club for the first time. Finally, his friend Mark clapped him on the back, grinning ear to ear. I was starting to think you'd never set foot in a place like this. Evan gave him a look. Some of us have expectations to uphold. Yeah. Mark rolled his eyes. But tonight, you're not Whitmore the heir. You're just Evan. So relax, drink, and for God's sake, have some fun. For once, Evan didn't argue. Maybe it was Adrian's words still echoing in his head. But tonight, for once, he wanted to be reckless. So he drank. One glass turned into two. Two turned into four. Soon, he found himself laughing at Mark's terrible jokes, swaying to the beat, his shirt collar undone in a way he never let himself appear. And then he turned too quickly on the crowded dance floor, straight into someone solid. Watch it. Evan began, then froze. Gray eyes. Unforgettable. It was Adrian. Well, Adrian drawled, leaning in close enough that Evan caught the faintest scent of whiskey. Whitmore. Didn't think I'd see you in a place like this. Evan's throat went dry. He wanted to step back, to compose himself, but the alcohol loosened his tongue. And what about you? He shot back. Does your family approve of you sneaking off to clubs? Adrian's smirk widened. I don't care what they approve of. The press of bodies forced them closer, until Adrian's mouth was just at Evan's ear. You know, Adrian murmured, his voice amused. I'm starting to think you're not as boring as you pretend to be. Evan scoffed, leaning closer without meaning to, words slurring just a little. Maybe you just don't know me at all. Adrian's smirk curved wickedly. Then show me. Someone shoved past them on the dance floor, knocking Evan forward. His hands went out to catch himself, landing on Adrian's chest, and suddenly their mouths collided. The kiss was clumsy, unplanned. Evan too drunk to realize what was happening. Adrian too caught off guard to move away. Then Evan jerked back, blinking, disoriented. He stumbled, the alcohol making the room spin. Before he could say more, Mark appeared, dragging him toward the exit, muttering something about getting him home before he passed out. Adrian stayed where he was, lips curling into the faintest, dangerous smile. The next day, the sunlight was merciless. Evan groaned as he sat up in bed, head pounding. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, and he reached for it lazily. A new message, from an unknown number. Adrian, you kiss better than I expected. Evan's blood went cold. He sat frozen, staring at the screen as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less horrifying. He scrolled up, searching for more messages. Nothing. Just that one line. How the hell did Adrian Rosendale get his number? Evan dropped the phone onto the sheets, running a hand over his face. His heart thudded harder than his hangover. He couldn't remember everything from last night, but there was one thing he knew for certain. Whatever happened, Adrian wasn't going to let him forget it. Evan avoided looking at his phone for most of the morning, but the buzzing kept coming. By noon, he finally gave in. Another message from Adrian. Adrian, cat got your tongue? Or do you only kiss and run? Evan's jaw tightened. The screen lit up again minutes later. Adrian, relax. I won't tell Claire. Not that she'd care. Another buzz. Adrian, you don't remember, do you? Evan's breath caught. Finally, he shoved the phone face down on the desk, exhaling hard. He wanted to know what happened. 2 days later, the Whitmores were invited back to the Rosendales' estate for another dinner. Evan had hoped that Adrian might restrain himself in front of their parents. He was wrong. Dinner had barely begun when Adrian leaned across the table, with a smirk. So, Whitmore, he drawled. How's your week been? Recovering well. Evan stiffened. Recovering. From your night out, of course. Clubs can be exhausting. Claire looked up from her plate, blinking. You went clubbing? Evan forced a smile. A friend dragged me out. Nothing worth mentioning. Adrian's smirk widened. Oh, I wouldn't say that. Some things are definitely worth mentioning. His gaze lingered on Evan. Evan's pulse quickened, heat rising under his collar. I don't know what you're implying. Adrian leaned back in his chair, satisfied. Oh, I think you do. The conversation shifted, their parents not really interested in the topic. The clinking of glasses and laughter filled the dining room as the evening wound to a close. Just as the plates were being cleared, his father spoke up. Perhaps it would be wise for Evan and Adrian to spend some time together outside of these dinners. Build a stronger bond. Evan's head snapped toward him. What? Mrs. Rosendale clapped her hands lightly, smiling. Yes, what a splendid idea. They'll be brothers-in-law soon enough. Why not start now? Evan opened his mouth, already crafting a polite excuse, but before he could speak, Adrian leaned forward. I'd love that, he said with a wicked smirk. Wouldn't you, Whitmore? Evan forced a tight smile. Of course. Excellent, Mr. Rosendale said, oblivious to the tension between them, but panic rose in Evan's chest. The last thing he wanted was to be alone with Adrian. Not after the texts, not after the kiss he still couldn't remember. Searching for an escape, he quickly added, perhaps Claire should come with us. It would be nice for the three of us to spend time together. Claire looked up from her untouched dessert. Oh, I suppose I could. For a moment, Evan almost relaxed, until Adrian leaned back in his chair, eyes gleaming with quiet amusement. Of course, he said smoothly. The more, the merrier. Evan had chosen the arcade because it was too bright, too loud, too crowded for Adrian to try anything. The moment they stepped inside, the air was filled with the chaotic chorus of clinking tokens, and kids shrieking in delight as machines lit up in every color. Oh! Claire's voice lit up suddenly, and Evan followed her gaze. A brunette in a leather jacket was waving from across the floor. A grin spread wide across her face. Susan. Before Evan could say a word, Claire was already moving toward her, her eyes brighter than Evan had ever seen. Sorry, Claire said quickly over her shoulder. I'll just catch up with her for a while. You two go ahead. And just like that, she was gone. Well, Adrian said, stepping up beside him. Looks like it's just you and me. Evan swallowed, forcing himself to look forward at the lights instead of at Adrian. Seems that way. Didn't think you'd bring me on a date, Adrian teased, leaning close enough that his words brushed against Evan's ear. But hey, I'm flattered. Evan's pulse jumped, and he quickly turned toward the nearest machine, dropping a token into it just to put space between them. It's not a date. It's an arcade. Let's just play something. Adrian's smirk deepened. Fine, he said, But let's make it interesting. The competition started harmless enough. First, basketball hoops. Adrian nailed every shot like it was second nature, while Evan barely managed to sink a handful. Then came racing games, with Evan crashing into every wall while Adrian drifted effortlessly around corners. By the end, Evan was frustrated, standing at a machine that had just declared his defeat. "That's 3 in a row," Adrian said smoothly, stretching his arms behind his head. "You're terrible at this, Whitmore." Evan rolled his eyes. "Some of us don't spend our lives in arcades." Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You know what this means, right? The loser has to take a dare." Evan blinked. "We never agreed to that." "Doesn't matter," Adrian said. "It's the rule now, and you lost." Evan crossed his arms. "Fine. What's the dare?" Adrian leaned in, his smirk curling wickedly. "Kiss me." Evan froze. "You're joking." "Not at all." Heat crawled up Evan's neck. He gave a forced laugh, waving it off. "It's just a game. Don't take it so seriously." But Adrian didn't move away. Instead, he reached out, fingers brushing the fabric of Evan's sleeve before tugging him forward, close enough for the noise of the arcade to blur into the background. "You said it yourself," Adrian murmured, eyes locked on his. "It's a game, and you have to stick to the rules." Before Evan could reply, Adrian tilted his head and pressed his mouth to his. The kiss was firm, unhesitating, laced with a spark that jolted through Evan's chest. Evan stumbled back a step, breath caught in his throat, eyes wide. Adrian smirked, licking his bottom lip as if savoring the moment. "Not so bad, was it?" Evan's heart was still hammering in his chest. He opened his mouth to protest, but his phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire. "Claire, heading out with Susan. Don't wait for me." Evan stared at the screen, frowning. She didn't even sound guilty about ditching them. Adrian leaned over, seeing the text before Evan could lock the phone. "She left." "Yeah," Evan said slowly. "Apparently with Susan." Adrian let out a sharp breath, half laugh, half relief. "Thank goodness I invited her." He froze. Evan's brows knitted together. "What did you just say?" Adrian straightened, the cocky mask flickering for the briefest second. "Nothing." "No," Evan pressed, narrowing his eyes. "You said you invited her. You invited Susan here." Adrian's lips quirked, but his silence said more than words. Evan's stomach twisted, the realization settling heavy. "So you set this up." Adrian finally met his gaze. "What can I say, Whitmore?" His voice dropped. "I knew Claire would be distracted, and I wanted some time alone with you." Evan's pulse stuttered. He hated how easily Adrian's words got under his skin. "This is insane," Evan muttered, shoving his phone into his pocket. "I'm leaving," Evan muttered, shoving past Adrian. "Whitmore, don't." Evan snapped. His steps were quick. He didn't stop until he reached the far end of the parking lot. Behind him, footsteps followed. Evan turned sharply. Adrian stood a few feet away, hands tucked in his pockets, expression unreadable except for the tiny smirk tugging at his mouth. "You don't have to run," Adrian said, voice low. "I'm not." Evan cut himself off, shaking his head. "You set me up just to." Adrian tilted his head. "Kiss you." Evan's breath caught. Adrian chuckled softly. "Don't worry, Whitmore. I'll let you go for now." Evan's hands clenched at his sides. He turned away, forcing his steps toward his car without another word. For 2 weeks, Evan had played a careful game of avoidance. When his parents mentioned another dinner with the Rosendales, he suddenly had deadlines. When they brought up wedding preparations, he excused himself for phone calls. But tonight, he didn't go home. Instead, he wheeled a suitcase into the lobby of a modest hotel downtown. Nothing extravagant, nothing flashy. He told his parents he was going on a week-long trip with friends. They believed him without question. Why wouldn't they? Evan had never lied to them before. But here he was, swiping a keycard and stepping into a small but tidy room. He set his suitcase by the bed, exhaling slowly as he sat down. For the first time in his life, he wasn't following the script. This was rebellion. Small, but rebellion nonetheless. Maybe, if he could just disappear for a little while, he'd finally figure out what he really wanted. Or who he wanted. For 3 days, Evan lived like someone else. He ordered breakfast in bed, read novels he'd abandoned years ago, and even walked through the city streets without a driver tailing him. It was the most reckless thing he'd ever done, and the most liberating. By the 4th day, he decided to venture out, pulling on a baseball cap and hoodie. The hotel's neighborhood was filled with small cafes and shops. He slipped into a coffee shop. He was halfway through ordering when a familiar voice cut through the air behind him. Well, Whitmore. Evan stiffened. Slowly, he turned, only to find Adrian standing a few feet away, a takeout cup already in hand, a grin spreading across his face. "What are you doing here?" Evan demanded. Adrian arched a brow. "Funny, I was about to ask you the same thing. Last I heard, you were on some trip with friends." He leaned in slightly. "Unless that was just a little lie, Heat rushed to Evan's cheeks. Don't start." Adrian chuckled, clearly enjoying every second of his discomfort. "Relax, Whitmore. I'm not going to tell Mommy and Daddy." His eyes narrowed slightly, curious. "But now I really want to know, what are you running from?" Evan turned away, muttering, "None of your business." Evan walked out of the cafe with his coffee clutched like a lifeline. Adrian's footsteps followed. Evan stopped halfway down the block and turned sharply. "Why are you even here? Don't tell me you followed me." Adrian raised his brows, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Relax. You're not that important." Evan frowned at that. Adrian chuckled at Evan's reaction. "I've got a friend who lives a couple streets over. Came by to drop something off. Figured I'd grab coffee before heading back." He shrugged. "Didn't expect to run into you of all people." Evan studied him carefully. He didn't seem to be lying. But he still turned to walk away, but Adrian's voice caught him mid-step. "Funny thing, though," Adrian drawled. "For a guy on a friend's trip, you sure look alone. It's almost like you're running away from something." Evan's shoulders tensed. Adrian closed the distance between them. His gray eyes locked onto Evan's. "So tell me, Whitmore," Adrian murmured. "Are you running from Claire? Or from me?" Evan's pulse thudded in his throat. He clenched his jaw and stepped back, needing distance. "You're unbelievable," he muttered, shoving past him. "I don't owe you an explanation." Adrian let out a soft laugh behind him, but he didn't follow him. Evan walked fast until the hotel came into view. He swiped his keycard with trembling fingers and shut himself inside his room. By the time evening fell, he decided to grab dinner from the lobby restaurant. He was halfway through checking the menu when he heard that voice again. "Small world," Adrian's voice drawled. Evan's stomach dropped. He turned slowly, and there Adrian was, leaning against the reception counter. "What are you doing here?" Evan demanded. Adrian shrugged. "Business ran late. Didn't feel like driving back across the city. Booked a room." His smirk widened. "Happens to be the same hotel as yours. Crazy coincidence." "Huh?" Evan's pulse quickened, heat creeping up his neck. "You're lying. Believe what you want," Adrian said casually before walking upstairs toward his room. Evan swallowed hard. No matter how far he ran, Adrian had found him. That night, Evan barely paid attention to the movie he was watching. His mind was too tangled. Somewhere in this building, Adrian was lounging in another room. Every creak in the hallway made Evan's pulse spike. Every set of footsteps passing by made him freeze, waiting for a knock that never came. Later on, he concluded. "He won't actually bother me," Evan told himself firmly. "He has no reason to." And then 3 soft knocks. Evan's heart dropped. He forced himself to wait, hoping whoever it was would leave. But the knocking came again, firmer this time. Reluctantly, he got up and cracked the door open just enough to see Adrian standing there. "Whitmore," Adrian greeted smoothly, as if they were meeting in broad daylight. Evan narrowed his eyes. "What do you want?" Adrian sighed dramatically. "My heater's not working. Room's freezing." Evan arched a brow. "Talk to the staff." "Already did. They said it won't be fixed until tomorrow." Adrian tilted his head. "So, unless you want me to freeze to death, you should let me crash here tonight." Evan scoffed, gripping the door tighter. "That's ridiculous. There are extra blankets." "That don't work nearly as well as central heating," Adrian interrupted. Come on, Whitmore. One night. I'll even take the couch. He should slam the door shut. Send Adrian back down the hall.
No.
Find another solution. You're not staying here. Adrian's smirk curved lazily, as if he'd expected that answer. Cold-hearted Whitmore. Really cold-hearted. He rubbed his arms, letting out an exaggerated shiver. Guess I'll just go back to my icebox of a room and well, if I don't wake up tomorrow, you'll know why. Evan's jaw clenched. You're being dramatic. Am I? Adrian tilted his head. All I asked for was a couch to crash on. I'm not asking for your bed. Pause. Not tonight, anyway. Heat shot up Evan's neck. Adrian. Okay, look. Adrian interrupted, his voice softening. It's one night. You won't even notice I'm here. I'll stay on the couch, keep quiet, and be gone in the morning. Evan exhaled slowly, his resistance slipping against the steady press of Adrian's gaze. Finally, with a frustrated groan, Evan swung the door open wider. Fine. One night. Couch. And don't touch anything. Adrian stepped inside. Evan shut the door, then walked to his closet and yanked an extra blanket. Adrian had already sprawled across the cushions. You really know how to make a guest feel welcome, he teased. Evan ignored him, tossing the blanket in Adrian's direction, but it caught on the edge of the armrest, half sliding back toward the floor. With an annoyed sigh, Evan stepped forward to grab it, only to catch his foot on the corner of the rug. He stumbled forward before he could catch himself, colliding hard into Adrian's chest. Evan froze, their faces inches apart. Adrian's gray eyes flicked down to his lips before rising to meet his gaze again. Well, Adrian murmured, voice low. If you wanted to be on top of me, you could have just asked. Evan flushed, scrambling to push himself upright, but Adrian's hand caught his wrist, holding him there just a second longer than necessary. Enough to make Evan's pulse race. Finally, Evan tore himself free, standing stiffly. It was a mistake. Adrian leaned back into the couch, smirk widening as he pulled the blanket over himself. Sure it was, Whitmore. Sure it was. Evan turned away. It had been an accident. So why did it feel like something else entirely? The night passed in uneasy silence. When morning came, Evan woke to the smell of coffee. He sat up to find Adrian already moving around the room like he owned it. You're awake, Adrian said. I went downstairs. They had decent coffee. Evan blinked, disoriented. You what? Adrian shrugged, handing him a cup of coffee. Didn't think you'd want to start your day without it. You seem like the type. Evan accepted it before he could stop himself. Thanks. Adrian used the bathroom first, humming as he showered. Evan frowned at the sound, only to roll his eyes harder when Adrian came out and said, Your turn, Whitmore. Evan showered quickly, then emerged to find Adrian flipping through the hotel's complimentary notepad. The two of them sat down together at the small table, sipping coffee. It was kinda comfortable. Hours later, Evan's phone buzzed across the table. He glanced at the screen. It was his mom. His stomach sank. With a sigh, Evan picked it up. Sweetheart. His mother's voice was warm but expectant. When are you coming home? Tomorrow, Evan said quickly. Tomorrow? She repeated, disappointment sharp. Evan, you've been away long enough. Your father and I want you back this evening. We're meeting with Adrian's family again. Wedding plans can't wait. His throat tightened. Mom. No excuses. This evening. And with that, she hung up. Adrian's voice broke the silence. So, they're still pulling your strings. His smirk was gone, replaced with frustration. Do you ever stop letting them decide everything for you? Evan's jaw clenched. It's not that simple. Sure it is, Adrian quickly said. You either live for them, or for yourself. That evening, as Evan gathered his things, Adrian shrugged casually. Guess I'll head back too. Wouldn't want you suffering alone. Evan narrowed his eyes. Don't have to. I'll see you at home, Adrian interrupted with a smirk, turning toward his own room. On impulse, Evan followed, stepping inside before Adrian could shut the door. By the way, the heater works fine now. Did they fix it? Adrian stilled, scratching the back of his neck. His voice dropped, almost sheepish. Yeah, about that. It was always working. Evan froze. What? Elite. Adrian said in a small voice, not meeting his eyes. Wanted an excuse to be in your room. Sorry. Evan's face burned with irritation and something else he didn't want to name. You're unbelievable. He looked shocked. You're not going anywhere with me, he said and stormed back to his own room. Later that evening, after fully packed, Evan marched out of the hotel, still angry that Adrian had tricked him. He had one plan: call a cab and go home. He regretted not bringing his car. But there was Adrian already outside, leaning against his sleek black car like he'd been waiting. "You're not seriously going to waste money on a taxi when I can drive you back," Adrian said casually. "Get in. I'll manage," Evan muttered, fishing his phone out. "Come on, Whitmore. Think of the environment. Think of your wallet. Or better yet, think of how awkward it'll look when your parents find out I offered and you refused." Evan paused, glaring at him. "You're manipulative, you know that?" "Guilty." Adrian flashed a smile, opening the passenger door. "Now, are you really going to make me drive home alone? After we've bonded?" Evan hesitated. He should call the cab. Instead, with a muttered curse, he slid into the passenger seat. Adrian shut the door behind him, grinning. Good choice. For a while, silence filled the space between them. Evan kept his eyes on the window. Adrian broke it first. "Still mad about the heater thing?" Evan's head snapped toward him. "You lied to get into my room." "Yeah, and it worked?" Adrian said simply, glancing at him with that maddening half-smile.
"Ok, I'm sorry."
"I shouldn't have done that." Evan turned back to the window. "You're unbelievable." Minutes later, Evan still stared hard out the window, trying to focus on anything but the man beside him. But the words slipped out before he could stop them. "Why did you do it?" Adrian raised his brows. "Do what?" "The arcade." Evan's pulse quickened. "Why did you make me kiss you?" For a moment silence stretched. Then Adrian's lips curved into that slow, knowing smirk. "Because I wanted to." Evan's head whipped toward him. "That's not an answer." At that moment, they got to a red light and Adrian's eyes flicked from the road to him. His voice dropped. "You were standing there, all proper, like no one had ever dared touch you. And all I could think about was how good you'd look falling apart." Evan's breath caught, heat rushing to his cheeks. "Adrian, you think I asked because of a game?" Adrian leaned closer, his smirk softening into something hungrier.
"No."
"I asked because I couldn't resist." The light turned green. Adrian's gaze lingered on him for a beat longer before returning to the road, like nothing had happened. But Evan sat frozen, heart pounding. It hadn't been just a dare. It had been real, and that terrified him. The ride stretched on, and Evan tried to stay alert, but exhaustion crept in. Before he knew it, his head had tilted against the window, already asleep. When he woke again, it was to the sound of the engine cut off. Slowly, he blinked his eyes open, and Adrian's face was the first thing he saw. Close. Too close. He was leaning in, his breath warm against Evan's cheek. "Wake up, Whitmore," he murmured, voice low. Evan's heart raced. He jerked upright, heat rushing to his face. What are you doing?" Adrian smirked, leaning back just enough to give him space. "Relax. I was just waking you up. Unless you wanted me to do it another way." Evan's heart thudded violently. "Shut up." Evan grabbed his bag, fumbling with the door handle just to escape the heat of Adrian's gaze. "See you later, Whitmore," Adrian said playfully before driving off. It has been weeks since then. Evan sat at the edge of his bed, staring at the beautiful envelope in his hands. It was the formal confirmation his parents had left on his desk that morning. The wedding date had been set. Invitations were already being sent. The venue, the menu, the guest list, every detail had been decided. He was getting married. In 1 month. His parents seemed thrilled. They spoke about it like it was a dream finally coming to life. But for Evan, it was a nightmare. He dropped the envelope onto the bed, burying his face in his hands. He wanted the ground to open up and swallow him whole, just to escape from it all. Adrian's voice replayed in his head. "You either live for them, or for yourself." Evan exhaled a shaky breath. The clock was ticking and he has to make a choice. Adrian didn't even bother knocking properly. He rang the bell, impatient, the invitation letter still crumpled in his hand. When Evan's mother opened the door, her face lit up. "Adrian, how wonderful. You're here to see Evan, aren't you? I'm so glad you two are getting along." Adrian's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. "Yeah, something like that." Come in," she ushered warmly, stepping aside. "He's upstairs, second door on the right. Go on. He'll be thrilled." Adrian didn't hesitate. He immediately went straight upstairs. He pushed the door open without warning, and froze. Evan was sprawled on his bed, shirtless, a book resting across his stomach. Sunlight slanted in through the window. His expression was distant until his eyes flicked up and widened at the sight of Adrian. "What the hell are you doing in here?" Evan shot upright, grabbing for the nearest t-shirt. Adrian leaned against the doorframe, heartbeat thudding in his ears, smirk tugging at his lips despite the sharp purpose that had driven him here. Didn't know I needed an invitation. Besides. He held up the wedding invitation card between two fingers. Looks like you already sent me one. Evan groaned, dragging the shirt over his head, avoiding his gaze. Adrian stepped further inside, closing the door behind him. His voice lowered, serious now. You're really going to let them marry you off in a month? Evan refused to look at him. It's already decided. The date's set. The preparations are nearly finished. There's nothing I can do. Adrian's laugh was sharp. God, you sound pathetic. Just rolling over because Mommy and Daddy told you to. Is that all you are, Whitmore? Their little puppet. Evan's head snapped up. Shut up, Adrian. Make me. The air between them sparked, electric, as Adrian stepped closer. His gaze dragged over Evan's face, lingering at his lips before snapping back to his eyes. What? You think I didn't notice? Adrian murmured, voice taunting. The way you look at me when you think I'm not paying attention. You want me, Whitmore. You're just too cowardly to admit it. Evan's pulse thundered. I don't. Adrian cut the denial off by catching his wrist, tugging him forward until their chests nearly touched. You're lying? Adrian whispered, his breath hot against Evan's mouth. And I hate liars. Heat rushed through Evan. Adrian leaned in slowly. Their lips met in a slow, hungry clash. Evan's hands fisted in Adrian's shirt, pulling him closer without meaning to. Adrian pressed harder, hungrier, like he'd been waiting for this from the moment they met. When they finally tore apart, both breathing hard, Adrian smiled softly. See? He murmured, thumb brushing just under Evan's jaw. This feels more real than that wedding ever will. Evan's mind screaming at him to push Adrian away. But his body wanted more. Evan's lips crashed back onto Adrian's before he could form another thought. Their mouths moving in sync like they'd done this 1,000 times in secret. Evan's fingers clenched tight in Adrian's shirt, torn between shoving him away and pulling him closer. Adrian broke the kiss only to leave a trail of kisses on his neck. Tell me this feels wrong, and I'll stop. Evan couldn't. His lips parted, but no words came, just shaky moans. Adrian smiled against his skin, victorious, before kissing him on the mouth again, deeper this time, and then the door swung open. Evan, darling, would you? His mother's voice broke off. Both men froze. Evan whipped his head toward the door, horror flooding his veins. His mother stood in the doorway, hand over her mouth, eyes wide with shock as she took in the sight of her son tangled up with the very man he wasn't supposed to want. For a moment, no one moved. The silence was deafening. Evan's stomach dropped. The ground didn't swallow him whole, but he wished desperately that it would. Evan, his mother's voice sharp with disbelief. What is the meaning of this? Evan stumbled back from Adrian, chest heaving, face burning. Words tangled uselessly in his throat. But his mother didn't give him time. Whatever this is, it ends now. You are marrying Claire, Evan. That's final. Something inside Evan snapped. I'm not marrying her. His voice rose, shaking. Can't you see? She doesn't even want this either. You're going to ruin her life and mine. For what? For your damn reputation. Evan. I said I'm not marrying her. He felt his eyes sting. Anger surged through his veins. I've done everything you asked. Everything. I've lived my whole life the way you wanted me to. And for what? So I can end up miserable? So she can end up miserable? His mother flinched, but her mouth set into a hard line. You don't understand, Evan. This is bigger than you. Don't you dare say that. Evan cut her off, voice cracking as he felt angry tears slip down his face. This is my life. Claire's life, not yours. Adrian stepped closer, standing firmly at Evan's side. His voice was calm and steady. He's right, Adrian said. Claire doesn't love Evan. Evan doesn't love Claire. You know it. Forcing them into this marriage will destroy both of them. And for what? Appearances? Evan's mother's eyes flicked to Adrian. Adrian, this is not. No, he shook his head, jaw tight. This has gone too far. If you can't see what's right in front of you, then I'll say it plain. Evan deserves to choose who he loves. And Claire deserves the same. The words hung heavy in the room. Evan's tears kept falling, but his chest eased, just slightly. He was happy he wasn't standing alone. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. Evan's father appeared in the doorway. His gaze swept the scene. Evan's flushed, tear-streaked face, Adrian standing protectively at his side. For a long, unbearable moment he said nothing. His expression betrayed nothing either. No fury, no shock, just an unreadable silence that made Evan's stomach twist. Finally, without a word, he turned and walked away. With one last conflicted glance at Evan, Evan's mother hurried after her husband, the door clicking shut behind her. The room was suffocatingly quiet. Evan's chest heaved as he sank onto the edge of the bed, running a trembling hand over his face. I can't be alone with them tonight. Adrian hesitated, then crouched in front of him, steady eyes meeting his. So don't be. Evan's gaze lifted, desperate. Stay, please. Adrian's nodded immediately. All right. That night, Evan curled into the bed while Adrian stretched out on the couch. The silence was thick with unspoken questions. Eventually, Adrian spoke up. So, he murmured, tone gentler than Evan had ever heard it. What does this mean for us? Evan turned toward him, heart pounding. The truth was terrifying, but he couldn't keep pretending anymore. It means, his voice wavered, I don't want to stop. Morning sunlight spilled across the Whitmore estate. That morning, Evan came down the stairs with Adrian at his side, his bag slung over his shoulder. His parents sat in the dining room, stiff with disapproval. His mother opened her mouth, but Evan didn't stop, didn't even look at her. He walked straight out the front door. Adrian followed. Moments later, they reached Adrian's car, and they drove to the tiny cafe down the street. After ordering, they sat down and Adrian pulled out his phone. She needs to hear this from me before anyone else. Evan watched as Adrian dialed. It didn't even ring twice before Claire's voice came through. Adrian? What's wrong? It's off, Adrian said. The wedding. Evan is not going through with it. For a second, silence. Then Claire let out a shaky laugh, half sob, half relief. Thank God. Adrian, her voice cracked. Susan and I can't keep pretending. When Adrian hung up, Evan pulled out his own laptop. Together, they drafted the email that would officially cancel everything, the venue, the catering, everything. The message was brief and polite. The engagement between Evan Whitmore and Claire Voss has been mutually dissolved. We apologize for any inconvenience. With a deep breath, Evan hit send. When it was done, Adrian leaned back, exhaling slowly. He looked at Evan, a rare softness in his eyes. Feels good, doesn't it? Evan nodded, but for the first time in weeks, his chest felt light. Felt like freedom. Evan knew the families will call for a meeting sooner or later and wanted to get it over with. Just like he predicted, that evening, they all sat at the Rosendales' estate. Evan sat at the table, hands folded so he wouldn't shake. Adrian lounged beside him, looking calm as ever. Across the table, Claire sat stiffly with Susan at her side, her fingers gripping Susan's hand beneath the tablecloth. Evan's parents and Adrian's parents sat at the head, eyes sharp. You've embarrassed us, Evan's mother snapped. Do you have any idea what people will say? What this will cost? And to cancel so suddenly, Adrian's mother added, her voice laced with disdain. This is reckless, childish behavior. You owe us an explanation. All of you. Claire suddenly slammed her palm against the table. Enough. Everyone froze. Claire's eyes were blazing, cheeks flushed. You want the truth? Fine. Susan and I, we're not just best friends. We're dating. We've been dating. Gasps rippled from both mothers, scandalized. You what? Claire's mother sputtered, clutching at her pearls. Literally. Before anyone could spiral further, Adrian leaned forward lazily. And since we're putting everything on the table. His gaze slid to Evan, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. I've been trying to convince Evan to date me. The room erupted in another round of horrified gasps. Evan's mother actually choked on her own breath, while Adrian's mother slapped her hand against the table. Adrian. Evan buried his face in his hands, groaning. You just had to say it like that. Adrian leaned closer, his voice low enough for only Evan to hear, a wicked glint in his eyes. What? They wanted an explanation. The dining room was chaos. The mothers hissing about reputations while Adrian sat back with his usual unbothered smirk. But then a deeper voice cut through the storm. Enough. Evan's father. The room fell quiet as he leaned forward. Evan looked up, startled. His father's eyes were steady, resting on him with a weight Evan wasn't used to. After the other day, his father began slowly. When your mother walked in on you and Adrian. What? Adrian's parents barked in unison, both whipping their heads toward Evan's mother. Nobody informed us of this. His father ignored them. I started rethinking. All these years, I've pushed you, Evan. We both have. We were shaping you into the son we wanted. But we never asked what you wanted. Evan's chest tightened. His father's voice softened. Not much, but enough to break something inside Evan. I should never have put so much pressure on you. On either of you, he added, nodding briefly toward Claire. If this is who you are, then be who you are. The words hit Evan like a blow. He'd braced himself for anger, rejection, disappointment, but not this. His throat closed, hot tears spilling down his cheeks before he could stop them. "Dad?" His voice broke. Adrian moved to comfort him, and Evan cried harder. Adrian's parents erupted the moment Evan's father finished speaking. "This is outrageous." Adrian's mother's voice shook with fury. "You can't just accept this nonsense. Adrian, how dare you humiliate us like this?" His father's face darkened. "Do you realize what people will say? Do you realize what this means for our name?" Adrian didn't even flinch. His eyes were bored. "You're worried about names, I'm worried about lives. See the difference? You insolent." "Enough." Adrian stood and he looked at Evan, offering a hand. "We're done here." Evan blinked. Slowly, he reached out, letting Adrian pull him up. Claire rose next, Susan beside her. "I'm done too. You can scream, but I won't waste another second pretending to be someone I'm not." And then, together, they walked out. Evan with Adrian's hand warm in his. Claire with Susan by her side. Adrian didn't take him back to the Whitmore estate. Instead, his car rolled up in front of his sleek apartment complex downtown. Inside, it was warm, quiet. It was Adrian's space. Evan hovered awkwardly near the door, still shaken from the night. Adrian tossed his keys on the counter, turned, and leaned against it, studying Evan with a small smile. "You look like you're about to bolt." Evan shook his head, swallowing hard. "I'm not. I just—" His chest rose and fell as he finally forced the words out. "Adrian, I like you. A lot." Adrian froze for a second. Then his lips curved wickedly. "Oh?" Finally admitting it. Evan's face burned. "Don't." But Adrian was already crossing the space, tilting Evan's chin up with a finger. His voice dropped. "Do you know how long I've been waiting to hear that, Evan?" Evan's breath caught, and then Adrian's mouth was on his. Shirts fell away. Hands tangled. Heat built until it was impossible to think about anything else but him. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds. Evan woke up. Adrian, still half asleep, smirked as Evan groaned, trying to sit up. "You'll be walking funny," Adrian drawled, voice raspy. Evan froze, cheeks flaming. "Shut up." Adrian stretched. "Sorry for going too rough." "Well," he brushed a lazy kiss against Evan's shoulder. "Not that sorry." Evan buried his face in a pillow, groaning. "I hate you." But Adrian just laughed, tugging him back into bed. "No, you don't." And he was right. 3 months passed like a dream. Evan had slipped seamlessly into Adrian's apartment. For the first time in his life, Evan wasn't living under pressure. He was living for himself. He hadn't spoken to his mother since that night. Not once. Until the calls started. Once. Twice. Every day for a week. Evan ignored them all. Then one afternoon, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, lips twitching. "It's her." Evan stiffened. "Don't answer." But Adrian raised a brow and hit accept, holding the phone out. "She's been begging to talk to you." Evan swallowed hard, heart pounding as he finally pressed the phone to his ear. "Hello." His mother's voice trembled in a way he'd never heard. "Evan, I'm so sorry." His chest tightened. "I was wrong," she said softly. "About everything. We put expectations on you and Claire that weren't fair. And I hate that I nearly lost you because of it. Please, forgive me." Evan closed his eyes. "I forgive you, Mom." His voice steady. "But I'm staying here. With Adrian." Adrian, sitting beside him, reached out and squeezed his hand. There was a pause on the other end before his mother whispered, "I just want you happy." When the call ended, Evan leaned into Adrian's shoulder. His life wasn't perfect still. Whispers in society circles still followed them, but Evan didn't care. Because each morning he woke up to Adrian's teasing smirk. Each night he fell asleep in arms that never let him down. And for the first time, Evan wasn't living someone else's life. He was living his own. The end.